Welcome to Spark Faith with me, Dr. Kris Sargent. This show is about renewed health, rooted in truth, and restored by grace. What does finding health look like for you? Do you have a vision for your future self and a way to get there? I'm Dr. Kris, and after 33 years in functional medicine and a lifelong journey through brain health, weight loss, hormones, mindset, and faith, I know that real transformation doesn't come from willpower or white-knuckling your way to wellness. It comes from gratitude, honoring your body as the temple that God created. This show is about body stewardship, not shame. It's about rewiring your mindset, your metabolism, and your spirit to find lasting health without the grind. I'll help you cut through the noise, see opportunities instead of obstacles, and finally live the healthy, purposeful life you were created for. Let's spark faith and transformation together. Spark Faith starts now. Hey, everyone. Welcome back to the Spark Faith Show. I am Dr. Kris Sargent. And today, as have been the last few episodes, this one's going to be a little more personal. And I just want to share some things with you that have happened over the last couple weeks or the last week or so. And I would love your feedback. So if you can subscribe and, reach out to me on social, that would be great. You can actually even hit a link on my website at drkrissargent.com and make an appointment with me. That would be even more fun, right? I can get to know who you are. So today we are having a strength episode in this Living F.R.E.S.H collective that every week we go through either foundation, regulation, energy, strength, and health. And today is a strength episode, and it's called Against the Current. And really the core idea here is that real strength isn't just physical, right? And we've talked about this before. I'm just going to bring it in from a little more personal direction and from a couple of things that have happened. And the way that God works, in our lives is that He allows us to see where He's moving through other people's stories. So I'm going to bring in a couple of stories today that will help us understand where this different kind of strength and what we need to do here. But anyway, real strength isn't always about physical, right? It's the daily choice to move forward toward the life that God is calling you to live, right? Even when the current of culture and sometimes our emotions, right, the way we feel, is pulling you in the other way. So every day you choose a current, right? Have you ever tried to swim or paddle against a current, right? My sister will tell you a story about when she got caught in a riptide in a canoe or a kayak. It was terrifying, right? And I'm not talking about like a current in a swimming pool, right? Either a river or the ocean. And maybe at first it's not like so hard. Maybe it wasn't so difficult in the beginning. But then after half an hour of paddling or swimming against it, right? You think you're moving, you think you're making progress, but then you realize like the current just never stops pushing against you, right? And so you don't fight it once, you fight it with every single paddle or every single stroke that you have. And honestly, sometimes that's a picture of life, right? Because every day there's a current that is going to pull us or push us somewhere. And the current culture says, be comfortable, right? You need to be comfy, choose what's easy, do what everybody else is doing, stay busy and distracted for sure. Say yes to everything because you don't want to miss out, right? FOMO, fear of missing out. blend in. Everybody needs to wear their hair this way. Everybody needs to wear this nail color, this style, fast fashion, right? Don't make waves. People might not like you. Don't be different, right? Don't ask for more. Don't believe for more. And those two right there is what the result of saying yes to everything and blending in is, right? What ends up happening is we just blend in and we don't ask where we are. We don't take account of where we are. We don't ask for more in our life. We don't believe that there's more for me or for ourselves. But honestly, I'm not going to get super preachy here, but Joshua 24:15 says, choose this day whom you will serve, right? We all are going to serve somebody, right? There's a song. So who are you going to serve and what are you going to serve, right? Joshua doesn't say, feel inspired someday, right? He doesn't say that. He says, choose this day. He doesn't say feel inspired someday of what you or who you will serve. No, not at all, right? Strength begins with a decision. Joshua says choose, right? There's a command there in that word. It's choose. Make a choice, make a decision, right? In other words, don't just drift with the current, kind of back and forth, right? Because you will get pulled out from shore, right? Especially if you're in like a big riptide, right? So you don't want to just drift with the current for too long. Strength, excuse me, I have something in my throat today. Strength begins when we decide we are willing to swim in a different direction or paddle in a different direction, which sometimes is upstream, right? So strength is really something that you are going to choose. There's so much to this. I have some amazing segments coming up right now. Okay. So we're going to talk with where strength begins long before anyone sees it, right? I didn't just come up with a bicep muscle yesterday. I didn't just, you know, open a business and it was a hit overnight. Neither did Steve Jobs, neither did Bill Gates, neither does any influencer that you follow, right? You don't see the minimum of 10,000 hours of work, literally 10,000 hours of work that they put in before you actually even knew who they were, before they had 1 million subscribers, before they had 100,000, before they had 10,000. They had 1,000 at one point, right? So most people, maybe you don't, but most people think strength is an outcome. Strength can be an outcome, but I think that really strength begins with a decision, right? And so before you become physically strong, right, you have to show up. You have to show up at the gym. You have to show up in meal prep. Before you become really emotionally resilient, you have to choose to stay present. You have to choose to respond and not react, right? Well, before you become like super financially responsible and disciplined, right? You have to choose a different lifestyle. Maybe you have to downsize your home. Maybe you have to get rid of eating out. Maybe you give up your Starbucks, right? Before someone develops spiritual maturity, they choose obedience over convenience, right? You choose obedience over convenience. So every visible act of strength was once an invisible decision. And from my own health journey, nobody sees the hundreds of choices that I've made over the past 40 years plus that I've made. I'm 62, right? you only see the result of where I'm at today. You don't see the workouts. You don't see the 185 pounds that I was after having kids. You don't see the meal prepping that I do instead of just grabbing something convenient. You don't see the choices that I make in the grocery store not to go down the cookie aisle and not to go down the chip aisle. You don't see the nights that I choose sleep over working a couple more hours, or you don't see those times, right? And so you just think, oh, I just get to she just gets to show up this way. But honestly, the moments that I have trusted the process instead of reacting emotionally, like, well, I don't want to go to bed right now. I want to stay up and watch one more episode of whatever, right? The moments that I trusted the process instead of just giving in to what I feel like doing, that's when strength is built, right? It's not, honestly, it's not dramatic moments. It's in the mundane. And that is so boring to talk about. Right? But it's really built in these day in, day out, ordinary decisions repeated consistently. And nobody, I know, consistency, consistently, four-letter words for some people, right? That don't curse me, don't curse that word. But honestly, strength isn't something that you eventually possess. It's something you repeatedly practice. And that's what creates that strength, right? We go through valleys so that we can become something different on the other side. So, strength also means swimming against the current. Whew, this is really hard. And my son and I had this conversation yesterday, which is what gave me the idea for this whole podcast. And then I had a conversation with a friend last night. So, one of the hardest parts of living differently is that your life looks different, right? Again, culture tells us to chase comfort, but scripture calls us to pursue character. Culture celebrates instant gratification. God often will work through our faithful perseverance, right? Culture says your worth comes through your productivity, your appearance, your achievement. Oof, that is such a lie that I lived for so long, right? But God says your identity is settled before you accomplish a thing. You don't have to do anything, right? As a follower of Christ about your identity. You are already worthy. So even in health, right? The current pulls really hard. Quick fixes, right? Extreme diets, detoxes, like, oh, the 7-day detox, the 30-day transformation. Look at me before and after, and you compare, right? Comparison is the thief of joy, right? But stewardship is much quieter. It's prepping your meals, taking a walk, lifting weights, going to bed, praying, reading scripture, doing ordinary things long enough for extraordinary fruit to grow, right? Trees and perennials, the first couple of years you plant them, they kind of look meh, right? But that third year, they bloom out and blossom and they kind of grow together and it becomes a beautiful garden. But it doesn't usually happen the first year. So there have been conversations, like I said, with my son about this very idea about how difficult it can feel to be surrounded by people who have settled into a mindset of limitation, right? People who quickly explain why something can't be done, um, why change isn't possible, why this is just the way life is. But honestly, as a believer, I'm not going to deny reality, right? I see what's happening. And I also will not let some kind of limitation or obstacle become my identity. I'm not going to let some limitation or obstacle become my identity. Because honestly, this is very cliche. I almost hate to even say it, but nothing, Nothinng, nothing is impossible for God. Wrap your head around that. And if he can use, um, a donkey to talk to people about himself, if he can use disciples that were untrained and just regular people to spread this message in the beginning, look at what's happened 2000 years later. So it's not about denying the reality. It's just really understanding that sometimes the greatest act of strength is believing that growth is still possible when everyone around you has accepted staying the same. It's it's a very big challenge, right? Drifting is effortless, but growth always requires intention. Okay. Strength reclaims your agency. Recently, I had a conversation with a friend that really stuck with me. And she had told me she had become incredibly good at making things happen with almost no resources, right? She had planned this giant seminar with essentially zero budget. She had organized a beautiful party in just a very short period of time over a holiday weekend. And she laughed and she realized she's very reflective and I just love her heart. She laughed and she said, I've gotten really good at pulling rabbits out of hats for a lot of people. And she realized, right? And she asked herself a question that changed everything for her. What would happen? And I want you to ask this question to yourself, for yourself, right? What would happen if I pulled a rabbit out of my hat for myself, right? And that was the question she asked herself, right? And not because she wanted to neglect her family or her work or her marriage. She wasn't becoming selfish, not because she was abandoning her responsibilities. Quite the opposite, actually. She just realized that she had spent years using her gifts, her creativity, and her energy to build everyone else's dreams while continually placing her own stewardship on the back burner. And how many of y'all are doing that right now? And I know you got little kids and there's not always a lot of time to do one tiny little thing for yourself. However, I want to encourage you to find that space in child raising, in going to school, in whatever it is that you're doing right now at work, if you're in a crazy busy season, whatever. She made a decision, and that's what we talked about at the beginning, right? For 6 months, no extra projects, right? Yep, still has to do all of her work stuff, but no unnecessary commitments. No saying yes because she was capable. Instead, she is choosing to say yes to her health, yes to hobbies that she's postponed for years, and yes to becoming the woman God is calling her to become. What would that happen? What if you ask that same question of yourself, right? That conversation also reminded me that agency, right? The ability to stick up for yourself, basically. Agency is one of the greatest gifts that God has given to us. And this is where stewardship comes in, right? Agency is the ability to choose. Even when you think you're like dug into a corner, you may have more options than you realize. Some of them may not be moral or legal, all right? But you can list all those out and look for options that you do have, right? You have the ability to respond instead of react. It's called responsibility. Respond over reacting. To live intentionally instead of accidentally. Like you think accidentally you're going to lose weight or you're just going to wake up one morning like magical thinking, right? Many of us, right? Many of us have slowly surrendered that agency to other people's expectations, people pleasing, to busyness and distraction. And underneath that, fear, guilt, shame, the pressure to always be available. So strength says, I can love people deeply without abandoning myself, right? So simple, and I've said this before, right? Jesus often withdrew to lonely places to pray. If you haven't watched The Chosen, you can see this so many times through that series. He didn't heal every single person in Israel, right? He wasn't driven by every demand placed on him. He lived from purpose, not pressure, right? He lived from purpose, not pressure. So perhaps one of the strongest things you can say is no. And, there's a great book, Codependent No More. Probably need to take a minute if you haven't done that. You probably want to read that one. Because every no creates space for a really meaningful yes. Every time you say yes to something, you're saying no to something else. And every time you say no to something, you're saying yes to something else. So maybe you need to take some time and think about where do I need to say yes to myself? Strength isn't saying yes to everything, right? And taking everything on. It's really having the courage to say yes when it really matters the most. All right. We're going to wrap this up in a couple minutes here, but I've got one more segment here. Strength trusts the process. This is patience. And I know that's another one with consistency, right? Patience and consistency. Horrible words. And yet, I'm going to give you a really practical example. Y'all know that my increasing calories over time, you can listen to some other episodes about this, but last week my calories were increased again. I was hungry and I'm like, whoa, I'm eating 2,000 calories a day. And she just bumped it up 2,100. And years ago, that would have terrified me, right? Even just months ago, it would have terrified me, right? And sure enough, the scale goes up. And frankly, the old Kris would have absolutely panicked and like, oh, I knew this wouldn't work, or I need to cut those calories out again. I need to fix this. I need to fix this. But this time, like, I know exactly what's going to happen. I know that eating a little bit more food causes more glycogen storage. That's our energy storage in our muscle tissue. And more glycogen means a little bit more water. So I know that those pounds are not failure, right? I knew that. They were really just physiology. And really, a couple days later, the scale was back down. And that may not sound like strength, but it is, because strength isn't only measured by how much you can lift at the gym, right? Sometimes strength is measured by your willingness to stay faithful when your emotions are telling you to quit. Patience isn't passive. Patience is active trust. I'm going to pull out a great verse. It's Galatians 6:9. Let us not grow weary in doing good, for at the proper time we will reap a harvest if we do not give up, right? This is the calorie story. This is building muscle. This is changing habits. This is sanctification, right? Paul really reminds us that harvest comes after faithfulness, just like a perennial garden, right? That beautiful garden doesn't happen in the first year. It comes after faithful watering year over year and not before. It's choosing not to abandon what you know to be true simply because you don't see the outcome yet, right? So maturity is trusting truth more than temporary emotion. So this is really one of the things that God has been teaching me through this whole journey, is that stewardship isn't just about managing resources. It's choosing directions. It's choosing every single day. And when we're becoming someone new, the question isn't whether we're changing, right? It's whether we're changing intentionally. And are we allowing the current culture to determine who we're going to become? Or are we choosing one decision at a time to be more Christ-like, to be this other person that we see ourselves able to become? This is movement, right? Stewardship isn't dramatic, I promise. It's choosing today's direction again and again. So, strength is not reserved for extraordinary people. It's built through ordinary choices. Faith over fear, purpose over pressure, stewardship and obedience over convenience, patience over panic. Swimming against the current, some days you're going to feel like you're not making any progress, and that is okay. The current can be strong. Nothing is impossible for God. So the God that's leading you is also strong and stronger than we are. So over time, those small, faithful choices won't simply change your health. They're going to reshape your character. And strength was never just about building muscle. It was always about becoming the kind of person who continues to choose what is true, what is good, and what leads to life, even when the current is pulling us the other way, right? So I love you guys so much. We are always, right, renewing our health. We are rooted in truth, and we are just absolutely trusting the grace of God every single day to watch over us and be with us. So, love you guys. I will talk to you next week. We will talk about health and we'll wrap up the series. I will bring all of these concepts that we've had over the last 4 together in a really fun episode. Talk to you later. Bye. You've been listening to Spark Faith with me, Dr. Kris Sargent. This show is about renewed health, rooted in truth, and restored by grace. Tune in every Thursday morning at 9:30 a.m. Pacific on the Transformation Talk Radio for more simple, faith-fueled steps to live the vision God placed in your heart. Are you ready to take the next step? Schedule a discovery call or connect with me at drkrissargent.com. That's DRKRIS Sargent.com. While you're there, download my free ebook, Endless Energy, the 6 non-negotiable keys to endless energy, and sign up for an upcoming masterclass. Don't forget to subscribe, like, share the show, and I'd love to connect with you on social media at Dr. Kris Sargent. Let's keep sparking faith and transformation together. Can't wait to see y'all next time.